son called it a fresh start. I called it the worst mistake I almost made. It was a Tuesday in March when he showed up at my door with a folder full of papers and that smile I used to trust more than anything in this world. He's always had that smile, even as a kid. Whenever he wanted something, an extension on curfew, money for a school trip he'd already spent on something else, he'd lead with that smile. I always gave in. His mother used to say I was too soft. She was right. She was right about a lot of things. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years working as a structural inspector for the county, crawling under bridges in February cold, writing reports nobody read until something went wrong. I retired at 62 with a decent pension, a house I'd paid off, and about $340,000 in a savings account I'd built slowly, carefully, the way you build anything meant to last. My wife passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 14 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I don't talk about it much. There's nothing to say that makes it smaller. After she was gone, my son, my only child, became the center of my daily life. He'd call every Sunday. He'd come by for dinner twice a month. I thought we were close. I thought I knew him. I did not know him. The folder he brought that Tuesday had a tab on it labeled Dad's Future. I remember staring at that tab while he poured himself a coffee in my kitchen like he owned the place. He'd always done that. Made himself at home in ways that felt warm when I was younger and felt like something else entirely once I understood what was behind it. He sat down across from me and slid the folder over. He said he'd been doing research, that I was isolated in this house, that the neighborhood had changed, that the furnace was old and the roof had another 2 good years at most. He said he and his wife had talked it over and they wanted me to come live with them. Sell the house, pool the money, buy something bigger together in Scottsdale, where the weather was easier on my knees. He said it made financial sense. He said it was what Mom would have wanted. That last part, that's what got me. I told him I needed time to think. He nodded like he'd expected that, like he had a timeline already built and my thinking was just a procedural step he'd already accounted for. He left the folder. He hugged me at the door. That night I called my granddaughter. She's 26, finishing her 2nd year of law school at University of Arizona. Sharp as anyone I've ever known. She got that from her grandmother, not from my side. I told her what her father had proposed. There was a pause on the line that went on long enough to make my chest tighten. She said, "Grandpa, don't sign anything." "Not yet. Can I come see you this weekend?" She drove 3 hours on a Saturday morning. She brought her laptop and a notepad and she sat at my kitchen table for 6 hours going through everything, my accounts, the deed to my house, my pension documents, a power of attorney form I hadn't even realized my son had slipped into the back of that folder, a form already partially filled out, in my name, with my address, with a signature line at the bottom waiting for me like a trap set and left open. I felt the floor shift under me. She looked up from the table. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just said, "Grandpa, I need you to call your bank first thing Monday morning." I said, "Why?" She turned the laptop around and showed me an email chain she'd found, not by hacking anything, not by doing anything wrong. She'd asked me to check my email while she watched, and there it was, in a folder I'd never created, sitting in my own Gmail account I barely knew how to use. An email chain between my son and a real estate agent in Scottsdale. The chain was 4 months old. They were already discussing listing my property. There was an email where my son described my house as the asset and described me as on board, just needs guidance. I was not on board. I had never been asked. I want you to understand something about that moment. It wasn't rage. I've seen enough in 68 years to know that rage burns fast and leaves you stupid. What I felt was something colder and more specific. It was the feeling of looking at something familiar. My son's handwriting in an email, his way of phrasing things, the shorthand he used, and realizing that this familiar thing had been working against me for months, maybe longer, while I'd been inviting him in for dinner and being grateful for the Sunday calls. Monday morning, I was at my bank when the doors opened. I spoke to the branch manager, a woman named Mrs. Okafor, who had handled my accounts for 6 years. I told her I needed to review every transaction from the past 12 months, and I needed to add an alert on any outgoing wire or transfer over $500. She pulled up my account and her expression shifted in a way that told me before she said a word. There were 3 transfers I didn't recognize. One for $4,200 in November, one for $7,500 in January, one for $30,800 in February. All 3 had gone to an account Mrs. Okafor traced back, carefully, professionally, to an LLC registered in my son's wife's maiden name. $15,500. Gone. I sat in that chair across from Mrs. Okafor and I thought about the furnace my son had mentioned, the roof, the knees. I thought about how the story he told me about my own vulnerability had been constructed piece by piece, not because he'd observed it, but because he needed me to believe it so I would let go of what I'd built. Mrs. Okafor flagged the account for the fraud department. She told me not to contact my son until I'd spoken to someone. She gave me the number for the county's Adult Protective Services and also for a detective she'd referred other clients to before. I drove home with my hand steady on the wheel and my mind very, very quiet. My granddaughter had already found me a lawyer, a woman who handled elder financial abuse cases. We met that Thursday at her office, and I laid out everything: the emails, the transfers, the power of attorney form, the real estate correspondence. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Mr. Calloway, what your son has done is a crime in the state of Arizona, more than one crime." Mr. Calloway. My name heard by someone who was about to fight for it. Now here's what my son didn't account for. He didn't account for the fact that I spent 31 years writing reports. I kept everything: emails, statements, paper records, screenshots my granddaughter showed me how to take. Every Sunday call from the past 6 months I now had logged with dates and notes. Not because I'd suspected him. I hadn't. But because that's just how I was built. You document. You verify. You don't assume the bridge is safe because it looks fine from the road. While the investigation moved forward, and I'm not going to lie to you, it moved slowly. It moved with the specific patience of legal machinery that does not care about your anxiety level. My son kept calling. He asked about the house. He mentioned the Scottsdale property was still available. He texted me a photo of the backyard, which had a pool. He said Mom always wanted a place with a pool. He used her twice in 3 weeks. That told me everything about how desperate he was getting. My granddaughter coached me. Answer normally. Don't tip anything. Don't sign anything. Don't let him in the house alone. I followed her instructions the way I'd once followed my supervisor's instructions on a dangerous site. Not because I couldn't think for myself, but because someone with more visibility than me was telling me where the unstable ground was. In April, the detective called. His name was Ruiz, and he'd been building the case quietly through the county fraud unit. He told me the LLC my son's wife had set up was also connected to 3 credit card accounts opened in my name 18 months ago. I did not know about those accounts. My credit score, which I never thought to check because I wasn't planning to borrow anything, had dropped 61 points. They had my signature on the credit applications. My real signature, traced, my granddaughter explained, possibly from the insurance documents my son had helped me file after my wife died. In the weeks after her death, I had signed many papers. I had not read all of them carefully. I was not in a state to read carefully. He knew that. He had been there handing me the pen. That detail did something to me that the financial stuff hadn't quite managed. The money can be replaced or some of it can. But the fact that he had looked at his father in grief and seen an opportunity, that doesn't repair. I'm not going to pretend it does. It sits in a specific place and it doesn't move. The arrest happened on a Wednesday morning. I wasn't there. Detective Ruiz had told me it would be cleaner if I wasn't. My son was taken from his office, not his home. His colleagues saw it. I don't feel good about that part. I don't feel bad either. I feel nothing about it, which is its own kind of loss. His wife was picked up separately. The LLC had been her structure, her paperwork, her account. She'd been the one conducting the actual transfers, which my son could argue he hadn't known about, except that the email chain made that argument very difficult. They were both charged: wire fraud, elder financial abuse, identity theft, unauthorized use of a financial instrument. The DA told my granddaughter's lawyer that the identity theft charge alone carried up to 5 years. My granddaughter drove down again that weekend. She didn't make a big deal of it. She brought groceries, and we made dinner together, and we watched television, and I fell asleep on the couch at 9:30 like I was 80 years old. And she put a blanket over me and didn't say anything about it. The hearing was in June. I sat in a courtroom in the same sport coat I wore to my retirement dinner, and I looked at my son across a room, and I thought about every Sunday call, every dinner, every time I'd been grateful. I thought about my wife handing him a 20 to keep quiet about something he'd seen, back when he was 11 and already learning that silence had a price. I'd thought it was cute at the time. I'd called it shrewd. I hadn't called it what it was. The judge, a compact woman who looked like she'd heard every version of this story and was thoroughly done being surprised by human beings, read through the charges without expression. When she addressed my son directly, she gave him a look that was not unkind and not forgiving, and said that the law existed precisely because the people we are supposed to protect most are also the people we have the most access to. He didn't look at me. Not once in that courtroom did he turn and look at me, and I've thought about why that is. I've decided it's because looking at me would have required him to reconcile two things that he'd spent a long time keeping separate: his father and what he'd done to his father. Some people can't hold both at once. Some people are built for it. He entered a guilty plea as part of a negotiated agreement. His wife took a separate plea. I won't go into the exact terms because my lawyer asked me not to. What I will say is that the $15,500 is part of a restitution order, and the credit accounts have been disputed and removed, and the power of attorney form that was waiting for my signature never got it. The house is still mine. The roof, as it turns out, has at least 5 good years. I had someone come check. My granddaughter calls me every Sunday now, and sometimes on Wednesdays for no reason. She's the one who told me I should tell this story. She said, "Grandpa, you think you were naive, but you weren't. You were trusting. Those aren't the same thing." I've been turning that over ever since she said it. I don't fully believe it yet, but I'm working on it. I'm 68 years old. I spent 3 decades making sure the things people relied on were safe to stand on. I should have inspected closer to home. I know that. But I also know that the bridge that fails is not always the one you were worried about. Sometimes it's the one that looked fine every single time you drove over it. If there is one thing I want you to take from this, one thing, it is this: check your accounts. Today, not tomorrow, not when you have time. Pull them up and look at every line, and if something doesn't match what you remember, make a phone call before you let yourself be talked out of it. And if someone who loves you, or who you thought loved you, is managing any part of your financial life without you in the room, change that. Right now, today, my granddaughter is the reason I still have a house to put a blanket over me in. That's the whole story. I've been thinking about what my granddaughter said, that trusting someone and being naive are not the same thing. I keep turning it over the way you turn a stone in your hand, feeling for the weight of it. I don't think I was a fool, but I think I made the mistake that a lot of people my age make, which is to confuse closeness with safety. My son was close to me. He knew the layout of my house and the name of my bank and the way I signed my name and the exact weeks I was least capable of reading carefully. Closeness gave him access, and he used that access the way someone uses a key they were never supposed to have. Quietly, methodically, for a long time before anyone noticed the door had been opened. What saved me wasn't luck. I want to be honest about that because I think people tell themselves it was luck, and if it was luck, then there's nothing to learn. What saved me was my granddaughter's character. She drove 3 hours on a Saturday because something in my voice told her to. She sat at my kitchen table for 6 hours because she believed that doing the right thing takes as long as it takes. She didn't panic, and she didn't make it about herself, and she didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. That's not luck. That's what a person looks like when they've built something solid on the inside. When their instinct is to move toward a problem instead of away from it, and to stay until the work is done. I think about the contrast a lot. 2 people raised in the same general world, one of whom looked at a grieving man and saw opportunity, and one of whom looked at the same man and saw someone worth fighting for. The difference wasn't circumstance. The difference was what each of them had decided to be over years and the small choices nobody was watching. My son is not a stupid man. He understood financial structures well enough to set up an LLC, to forge documents, to time transfers in ways that took months to untangle. That's not nothing. But intelligence without integrity is just a sharper tool for doing damage. I've seen it in the field. The engineer who knows exactly how much corner to cut before something fails. Knowing how doesn't mean knowing better. And eventually, every structure built on dishonesty finds its load-bearing moment and comes apart. What I carry forward from this is something I'd call grit of a different kind. Not the grit of enduring, but the grit of not looking away. Of checking the account when you'd rather believe everything is fine. Of making the call when the easier thing is silence. I spent 31 years inspecting things that looked fine from the road. I should have known better than to assume that what's close to you is what you understand best. My granddaughter calls me every Sunday now. She's the reason I still have a house, a name, a savings account that belongs to me. I don't think she fully knows that. Or maybe she does, and she's too good to make anything of it. Either way, I intend to be worth the 3 hours she drove.